Nadine, thank you. Thank you everyone for inviting me to present, and greetings from Seoul, Korea. I am currently based in Seoul, Korea, part of the Asia Pacific region group. As Nadine said, I want to provide a global perspective. So I will briefly introduce you to the World Bank, the work we do with client countries, particularly in developing SDIs, and end with the partnerships that are needed and have been created for geospatial information management globally. So the World Bank, we adopted what we call the twin goals in 2013, and that is to end extreme poverty, so those living on less than $2 per day, and to promote shared prosperity, focusing on the bottom 40% of the population in every country. We want to achieve these goals in a sustainable manner, and that is very much in line with the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. The World Bank Group is actually 5 institutions. Most people are familiar with the World Bank. That's the arm I belong to, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and the International Development Association. And our main client and our main focus is providing technical assistance and financing to government. But we do have a private sector arm, and we also have a dispute settlement aid and a guarantee agency. We are organized by regions, and we allocate our funds and our work through the Ministry of Finance. I come from the operational side of the World Bank rather than the research arm. So in operations, we work directly with the clients and provide the financing and the technical assistance. We have more than 100 country offices worldwide. I am part of the Sustainable Development Group, and under that, the Urban Resilience and Land and Geospatial Global Practice, with a portfolio of more than 40 billion US dollars. About 2 billion of that is focusing on land and geospatial projects globally. And in our work with client countries, we focus on facing many of the challenges that our clients are facing, that the governments are facing. In the Asia Pacific region, the rapid population growth, particularly in urban areas, the need for the housing units, for renewable energy, the fact that most of the world's population of indigenous peoples are in the Asia Pacific region. How do we support their livelihoods? The impacts of climate change, sea level rise, and natural disasters, and the increasing economic uncertainty and poverty, and particularly in the last 8 months with COVID-19 and the impacts are being felt especially hard in the bottom 40% of the world's population. What we focus on in our land and geospatial unit, we start with land because land is the most valuable asset that is owned by the poor and the bottom 40%. So we spend a lot of time and we focus a lot of financing on securing land rights, developing the land market, and providing land-related services. And building on that and integrated with that is looking at the geospatial aspects and the problems of lack of access to data, limited data sharing, very much due to the lack of infrastructure and standards, the weak governance, and the limited capacity. So Nadine says she likes concrete cases, and this is what we face every day when we go work with mapping and cadastral agencies or national mapping agencies. So maps, if they exist, are often in paper form. They're in very poor condition. How do we digitize this information to even take the first step towards creating an SDI? Very difficult. Perhaps even worse is when the official information is wrong. It does not match the reality on the ground. We spend a lot of time and a lot of financing and community involvement is needed to correct these mistakes. Same with legal documents and archives. I mean, these are actual cases, whether legal records are contained in garbage bags or whether even if they're in neat files, color-coded files, we talk about knowledge on demand, how can people access the information, share the information, use the information? So more than 60% of our 2 billion investments are currently for digitizing data and creating systems to provide land administration services, land data, and building the spatial data infrastructure of a country. And new technology has facilitated being able to move from global and national level projects down to the local level. So using drones for local decentralized mapping, working with the community on the mapping, much more fast production times, on-demand services, and then the new software and mobile applications that are out there to engage with the community, to empower them, to secure their land rights, to secure their information, and verify, because they're the ones that know what is happening on the ground, not necessarily the National Mapping Agency. And then we work on integrating that information with other, so we start with land data, integrating that information with other data sets. Here's an example from Vietnam of working with the municipality of Ho Chi Minh City and taking cadastral data from one agency, integrating it with the transport data and realizing that it's out of date. And so significant investments are needed just to bring together 2 layers of information, much less all of the other data layers that are needed to really make good decisions and to provide the services that a municipality should be providing to its citizens. And again, the fair data principle, Nadine already mentioned this: findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. Those 4 words require significant amount of investment and reforms in data, in governance, and in capacity. And the challenges we face are considerable. Policy and legal regulatory frameworks are much slower than innovation and technology. Institutional structures, data sharing is extremely difficult within government, much less sharing it with the private sector and citizens. Interest groups, so cadastral surveyors, land conveyancers, notaries, we are often barriers to introducing new technology and allowing countries to leapfrog forward. Capacity across all of the sectors, and needing to address education to ensure that a country is producing the professionals that are needed in the future. And that requires creating strategic partnerships to address all of those challenges. And if we speak of geospatial technology and information, whether we're thinking globally, beginning with the Sustainable Development Goals, or locally, helping countries develop smart and resilient cities, providing better e-government infrastructure, precision agriculture, all of this requires accurate and current geospatial information. So it requires investment, significant investment. So well-established business lines exist in the World Bank, and I think in most countries, for transport, for energy. But when we think about data, this requires a new kind of infrastructure, the National Information Infrastructure and National Spatial Data Infrastructure. And how do we convince the Minister of Finance to finance this new type of infrastructure is a real challenge. And about 5 years ago, we started thinking, how do we help our clients more systematically across the world? So the European Union has the Inspire Directive. For better or for worse, it did provide a framework for our client countries in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. It provided a framework guidance for them of what they need to do to develop their SDIs. So we thought, what do we do globally? Because the economies are changing, the information requires location-based data and services. There's this big and growing divide between developing and developed countries, and the governments have a key role in addressing that divide. And we, as the World Bank, financing governments, have to have a key role. And to avoid these siloed, duplicative, and inefficient data and systems that currently exist. The World Bank, we entered into a strategic partnership with the United Nations and UNGGIM in 2017 with the aim to develop this overarching framework and then implement it through country level action plans and investment plans with a particular focus on low and middle income countries. And here you see the results in 2018, the IGIF. This is a holistic framework for countries to use, not only in the developing world, but the developed world as well, through 9 strategic pathways that look holistically at governance, technology, and people, and what is needed to be in place to create this SDI foundation. The IGIF is 3 interlinked parts. The overarching framework is a high-level document for decision makers. The implementation guide for those of us, the implementers, was just adopted in August of this year. And the World Bank, we've been focusing on developing tools and templates to help implementation at the country level. The methodology we've developed is 4 steps. We go into a country and very quickly do a rapid diagnostic and baseline assessment. We then turn to the business case. What are the country's policy and business drivers, or what are their challenges, their pain points? We focus also on a socio-economic analysis. So we have to bridge this divide between the geospatial community and technical speak and the economists and the ministers of finance or the budget holders. How do we convince them to invest? And finally, we end up with an action and investment plan. So again, how do we as the geospatial community speak the right language for economists and for ministers of finance? And that is through creating the business case for geospatial investment. What is the value? And there's an increasing amount of information, but it's mostly from developed countries. So we've also spent a significant amount of time looking at benefits of geospatial information in low and middle income countries. So I'm going to give you a specific example, our work in Mongolia. Perhaps some of you recognize the jockey in the blue coat. This is Australia's very own Leslie Arnold. So last year, we worked with the Mongolian government, going through this methodology, using the IGIF as a framework, helping them develop their vision of a geo-driven e-government. That is the government's focus. And how does the SDI help them deliver better public services, develop the private sector, and to enable the communities to have more information and engage in the decision-making process. Focus a bit on the investment analysis. We spent quite a bit of time trying to understand the benefits to the government, to the business, to social, and to the environmental sectors. And we were able to calculate a return on investment of 250% using the standard World Bank infrastructure project model. So now we can compete with the roads teams, the energy teams on infrastructure investment. And we ended up with an investment plan with very clear goals, with all of the stakeholders involved through stakeholder consultations, a very detailed investment plan, time-bound, and a roadmap to help the National Steering Committee work through the investments and the reforms that are needed. And my final thought, and as I was thinking about my message and the title, Putting Knowledge in the Hands of People, sometimes it begins with a single piece of paper with a map on it. That's how it begins. But that piece of paper will empower people and provide the foundation for economic development and sustainable livelihoods, and helping the world reach the sustainable development goals. With that, I thank you.